There are moments that don't slam into your life. They don't scream or shout. They creep in softly. They slip between the cracks when you're not paying attention. When you're tired, when you're lonely, when your heart has gone too long without being touched. And by the time you realize something's changed, you're already standing on the wrong side of a line you didn't even know was there. It's been 2 years now. 2 years since the night I offered David something that seemed so small, so harmless, and yet it cracked my world wide open. Just a taste. That's all it was supposed to be. But moments have a way of growing bigger once you let them inside. They echo. They cling to you. They pull at you when the house is quiet, and there's no one left to lie to but yourself. Even now, after all this time, I still lie awake some nights, wondering, was it kindness I offered him? Or was it something far more dangerous? Was I reaching for him out of love? Or out of the desperate need to feel alive again? It's not an easy thing to admit. It's easier to pretend it never happened, to fold it up small and tuck it away in some dark corner of my mind. But pretending doesn't erase it. It just lets it fester. And promises. Well, promises have a way of gnawing at your soul if you break them. I promised myself that one day I would tell the truth. All of it. Even the parts that make me look weak. Even the parts that make me look wrong. Because maybe, somewhere out there, someone else is sitting in the dark, drowning in loneliness, aching for a touch that feels more like home than harm. And maybe if they hear my story, they'll understand they're not alone, that the human heart isn't made of neat, clean lines. It's messy. It's hungry. It's so desperately hungry sometimes. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve it. But I owe you the truth. I owe myself the truth. So here it is. The story of the night everything changed. The night I offered David a taste. And realized, too late, that some things once tasted can never be undone. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where we don't just tell stories. We explore the fragile cracks inside the human heart. I wasn't always this version of myself. There was a time I laughed easily. A time when a simple touch, a glance, a word meant something more than duty or habit. But somewhere along the way, somewhere between the long days and the longer nights, I faded. Bit by bit, almost without noticing, I became invisible inside my own life. I'm 42 years old. A wife, by name only. A stepmother, trying to fill a space that was never quite mine to claim. A woman who once believed in fairy tales, now living in a story that doesn't have a happy ending. My husband, Mark. He used to be warm. He used to make me feel like the only woman in the world. But now he barely looks at me. Now, his smiles feel more like obligations, his touches rare and hollow, like someone crossing off a chore on a list. We didn't fight much. Fighting would have meant there was still something left to save. No, we drifted. We became polite strangers sharing a kitchen, a bed, a last name. And then there was David. David, my husband's son from his first marriage, 19 years old, with soft, serious eyes and an old soul trapped in a young man's body. He wasn't loud like most boys his age. He wasn't reckless or wild. He was quiet, gentle in a world that rewards sharp edges. He loved to draw, pages and pages of charcoal sketches, filling the corners of his room with pictures of places he wanted to escape to. Sometimes I would catch him staring out the window, his sketchbook resting forgotten on his lap, like he was waiting for something or someone to save him. David never called me Mom. I never asked him to. We danced around each other in this strange, delicate rhythm. Not quite family, not quite strangers. Two lonely people orbiting the same empty house. And God, was it an empty house? The walls were painted in cheerful colors, but the air was heavy, weighted down by all the things we never said. You could hear the clock ticking from any room. That's how little laughter lived there anymore. Mark was always away, work trips that seemed to stretch longer and longer, as if even he couldn't stand the silence he helped create. It was the kind of silence that didn't just fill a room. It seeped into your skin, into your bones, until you started to wonder if maybe you weren't really alive at all. I spent my days pretending. Pretending I didn't notice how Mark barely spoke to me anymore. Pretending I didn't notice the way my own reflection looked back at me a little more faded each morning. And David. He spent his days drawing, studying, moving through the house like a ghost trying not to disturb the living. We were two shadows passing each other in hallways, two hollowed-out hearts beating quietly under the same roof. And neither of us said a word about it, because saying it out loud would have made it real. And some things once spoken can't ever be taken back. It started with something so small, something so ordinary, that if you blinked, you might have missed it. Mark was out of town again. Another conference, another 3 days of silence stretching out ahead of me like a long, empty road. The house felt colder when he was gone. Not in temperature. In spirit. Like whatever thin thread still tethered this place to the idea of home disappeared with him. I couldn't sleep that night. The quiet was too loud, the bed too big. So I wandered into the kitchen, looking for something to do with my hands. Something to fill the hours that stretched between midnight and dawn. Baking had always been my therapy. The soft clatter of bowls, the rhythmic mixing, the warm promise of something sweet at the end. It was one of the few things that still made me feel useful, human, needed. I had just started sifting flour when I heard footsteps behind me. Light, hesitant. Not Mark's heavy, businesslike tread. I turned and found David standing there, barefoot, hair tousled from sleep, an old t-shirt hanging off his narrow shoulders. He looked younger somehow in that moment, like the boy he must have been before life started weighing him down. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, keeping my voice soft, careful. He shook his head and offered a small, sheepish smile. "No. I smelled something good." I laughed, a real laugh, the kind that surprised even me, and waved him in. "Come on," I said. "If you're awake, you might as well help." And just like that, without thinking, without planning, I let him into my quiet, lonely little world. We moved around the kitchen together, awkward at first, me giving instructions, him asking questions, his voice low and tentative in the heavy stillness. "What's the difference between baking soda and baking powder? How do you know when it's mixed enough? Is it supposed to look like this?" Little things. Harmless things. The kind of small talk that should have meant nothing at all. But there was something under his words. Something under the way his eyes followed my hands. The way he laughed a little too long at my jokes. The way he brushed against me just slightly when reaching for the sugar. Nothing blatant. Nothing I could call wrong. Not yet. But I felt it. God, I felt it. The air in the kitchen grew thicker with each passing minute, like walking through invisible syrup. Each glance, each laugh, each accidental touch. It all stuck to my skin. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was tired. That I was reading too much into nothing. Because the truth was, I wanted it to be nothing. I needed it to be nothing. Because if it was something, if it was anything more, then I wasn't just a lonely woman baking cookies at midnight. I was something else entirely. Something I wasn't ready to face. David stayed close. Too close. And yet, I didn't tell him to go. I didn't step back. I didn't break the spell. We laughed over a spilled bag of chocolate chips, our hands bumping clumsily on the counter, and for one brief, breathless second, I caught him looking at me not like a boy looks at a mother figure, but like a young man looks at a woman he doesn't quite know how to approach. It was there. In his eyes. In the quick flush that rose to his cheeks before he turned away, and in the way my heart stuttered in my chest. Not in alarm, but in something far more dangerous. I should have said goodnight right then. I should have laughed it off, sent him back to his room with a plate of cookies and a kiss on the forehead, and locked the door to my heart behind him. If I had said goodnight then, maybe nothing would have happened. Maybe everything would be different. But I didn't. I stayed. I let the moment stretch and breathe and settle around us like warm honey. And somewhere deep inside me, somewhere I didn't dare admit even to myself, I wasn't just baking cookies anymore. I was feeding a hunger that had been gnawing at me for far too long. I told myself he was just lonely too. That's all it was. Two lonely souls trying to fill a hollow night with something, anything, that didn't feel so empty. I told myself I was being kind. That letting him stay a little longer, letting him laugh and brush shoulders and steal tastes of batter off the spoon, that it was harmless. That it was good for him. Good for me. Because God knows, no one else had looked at me like that in years. Not Mark. Not anyone. I wasn't invisible in that moment. I wasn't background noise or an afterthought or a duty to be tolerated. I was seen. I was heard. I was wanted. And after so long of being forgotten, discarded, looked through like glass, the feeling was intoxicating. It wasn't about desire. Not then. It was about being noticed. About remembering what it felt like to matter. What it felt like to have someone's whole attention focused on you, like you were the only person in the world. It was a dangerous kind of warmth. The kind that seeps into your bones and makes you forget how cold you've been all this time. I should have pulled away. I should have sent him back to his room with a laugh and a reminder that it was late, that we both needed sleep. But I didn't. I couldn't. I craved the attention like a dying man craves water. I soaked it up shamelessly, desperately, even as some small, frightened part of me screamed to stop. But that part was so easy to quiet. All it took was one more laugh, one more lingering glance, one more accidental brush of hands over the mixing bowl. And I told myself again, he's just lonely too. He needs this just as much as you do. Kindness. That's what I called it. I wrapped it up in the prettiest word I could find, trying to cover the growing hunger underneath. Because hunger wears many faces. Sometimes it looks like laughter. Sometimes it looks like a shared plate of cookies at midnight. Sometimes it wears the gentle mask of caring. But underneath, it's still hunger. And hunger, when fed, only wants more. I leaned on the counter, watching him work the dough with serious concentration, his brow furrowed, his lips pressed tight in focus. And for one horrifying, breathtaking second, I imagined stepping closer. I imagined reaching out, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Imagined what it would feel like to have someone lean into my touch instead of pulling away. I blinked hard, forcing the thought away, clenching my fists until my nails dug half-moons into my palms. This wasn't who I was. This wasn't who I wanted to be. But it was so easy to forget that in a house where love had long ago packed its bags and left. I kept telling myself it was nothing. That I was just tired. That it was innocent. But deep down, in the quiet parts of me where no lies could reach, I knew something had shifted. Something had tilted, just slightly. But enough that the whole fragile balance would never be the same again. I stirred the batter a little too hard, splattering flour across the counter, and David laughed. A real laugh, free and unguarded, and for a moment, the kitchen was filled with a lightness I hadn't felt in years. It should have made me happy. It should have made me proud. Instead, it broke something inside me. Because I knew that lightness didn't belong to us. It wasn't pure anymore. It was borrowed. It was stolen from a place we both shouldn't have touched. Kindness can sometimes mask hunger, and loneliness can sometimes dress itself up in the prettiest disguises. Until you don't recognize it until it's too late. I smiled back at him anyway, because smiling was easier than running. Because part of me, the part that still dreamed at night of hands that didn't pull away, wanted to stay exactly where I was. And pretend, for just a little while longer, that it wasn't hunger at all. The batter was ready. The oven was warm. The kitchen smelled like something safe, something sweet. But nothing about that moment felt safe anymore. I scooped a dollop of dough onto the tip of my finger, turned to him with a mock seriousness, and held it out. Official taste tester duty, I said, trying to make it a joke, trying to keep the moment light, harmless, trying to convince myself it was nothing. He hesitated, just for a second. Just long enough for me to catch the flicker of confusion in his eyes. Long enough for something silent and dangerous to pass between us. But then he smiled, that shy, boyish smile that somehow made the whole room tilt, and leaned in. And I didn't pull my hand away. I didn't offer him a spoon or laugh it off. I stood there, arm outstretched, heart thundering against my ribs as he leaned closer. His lips parted just slightly, his breath brushing across my fingers. And then, carefully, almost reverently, he took the taste from my hand. His mouth closed over the tip of my finger. Warm, soft, real. And for a moment, the world stopped turning. My breath caught in my throat. My skin burned where he touched me. And instead of pulling back, instead of retreating like I should have, I let it linger. Just a second too long. Just long enough. His eyes lifted to meet mine. Still close. Too close. And in those wide, searching eyes, I saw the reflection of my own hunger staring back at me. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The kitchen, once filled with the clatter and hum of late-night baking, fell into a thick, heavy silence. The clock on the wall ticked louder. The oven hummed in the background. But between us, only the sound of shallow breathing and the quiet, undeniable truth of what we had just done. It was nothing. And it was everything. A taste. That's all it was. And yet somehow, it felt like a door had swung open wide, and neither of us knew how to close it again. He pulled back first. Slowly, his cheeks flushed, his eyes darting away like a boy caught stealing something precious. I laughed. Too loudly. Too nervously. Trying to patch over the crack that had just split the air between us. Good, right? I said, my voice wobbling at the edges. Almost professional. He nodded, smiling, but it was different now. Everything was different now. He went back to shaping cookies, hands a little clumsier than before. I busied myself wiping counters that didn't need cleaning, pretending not to feel the way my fingers still tingled, pretending not to notice how the distance between us felt heavier, more dangerous than closeness ever could. Laughter still slipped out here and there. But it lingered too long now. Hung too heavily between words. Our gazes met a few more times, fleeting glances, too fast to be innocent, too slow to be accidental. Each glance a thread, pulling us closer across a chasm neither of us knew how to cross, or how to walk away from. That moment, that taste, was the beginning of a hunger neither of us had words for. And deep down, buried beneath the batter and the laughter and the walls I tried so desperately to rebuild, I knew there would be no going back. The cookies sat forgotten on the counter. The smell of sugar and vanilla hung thick in the air, but neither of us moved. David stood there, a half step too close, staring at me with eyes that said all the things we didn't dare. Questions swam there. Hesitations. Hope. Fear. And I couldn't breathe. The silence between us was unbearable. It pressed down on my chest like a weight. It screamed louder than any words could have. I turned away first. Coward that I was. Pretended to fuss with the oven. Pretended there was something urgent that needed doing. But my hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the tray. I caught a glimpse of myself in the oven glass. And what I saw wasn't me. It wasn't the woman who had once believed in love, in marriage, in happily ever afters. It wasn't the woman who used to bake cookies with the radio playing too loud, singing into a wooden spoon and laughing until tears ran down her cheeks. It was someone else entirely. Someone I didn't recognize. Someone hollowed out by years of being unseen. Someone who had mistaken a boy's smile for salvation. Someone who had crossed a line she could never uncross. I pressed my palms hard against the counter, willing myself to breathe, willing the pounding in my chest to slow. But it didn't. It only got louder. Faster. This wasn't just loneliness anymore. It wasn't just the ache of an empty bed or the silence of a loveless house. It was something darker, something deeper, something that scared me more than anything had in a very long time. I had let the hunger in, and now it was ravenous. I opened my mouth, tried to find words that would fix it, patch it over, make it small again. But all that came out was a broken whisper. "You should go to bed, David." My voice cracked halfway through his name. It splintered in the middle of the quiet kitchen, shattering whatever fragile piece had been left. For a moment, he didn't move. He just stood there, watching me, something raw and pleading flickering across his face. And, for one terrifying second, I thought he was going to step closer. That he was going to close the space between us and make real the thing we were both pretending hadn't already started. But he didn't. He dropped his eyes, nodded once, and without a word, turned and walked away. I listened to the soft tread of his bare feet fading down the hallway, listened to the creak of his bedroom door closing, listened to the unbearable silence that followed. And then, I slid down to the kitchen floor, my back pressed against the cold cabinet, my knees pulled up to my chest, and for the first time in years, I cried. Not the pretty kind of crying you see in movies. The real kind. The ugly, gasping kind. The kind that shakes you apart from the inside out. Tears poured down my face, salty and relentless, soaking the front of my shirt. I tasted the salt of my own tears on my lips, and all I could think was, how did it come to this? How did a life built on promises and vows and good intentions end up crumbling with a single taste? The cookies burned in the oven. The clock ticked on, uncaring. The house stayed silent. And I sat there, broken and small, holding the weight of what I had almost done and what I knew, deep in my gut, was already too late to undo. Morning came whether I wanted it to or not. The pale light slipped under the edges of the curtains, creeping across the floor like a thief, dragging me into another day I wasn't ready to face. I moved through the motions on autopilot. Coffee, toast, dishes clinking too loud in the stillness. David was already at the kitchen table when I shuffled in, head bent low over his phone, his fingers tapping idly against the screen. He didn't look up, and I didn't call attention to it. We moved around each other like strangers wearing the faces of people who used to know each other better. I poured him coffee without asking if he wanted any. He thanked me without meeting my eyes. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't the old, comfortable kind of silence born from living under the same roof. It was sharp now, tense, a living thing that buzzed against my skin. Every small sound felt magnified, the clink of his spoon against the mug, the shuffle of his chair as he shifted uncomfortably. I couldn't look at him, couldn't bear the thought of seeing what might still be lingering in his eyes. Instead, I stared at the counter, at the burnt cookies piled on a plate we both pretended not to notice, at the faint smudges of flour I hadn't bothered to wipe away. The house felt heavier somehow, like it knew what we had done, what we had almost done. The front door opened around noon. Mark's heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway, punctuating the silence like hammer blows. He was home, back from whatever hotel, whatever conference room had kept him away this time. And he walked into the kitchen whistling under his breath, setting his suitcase down with a thud, rubbing his hands together like a man returning from battle, expecting a hero's welcome. He didn't notice the stiffness in the air. Didn't catch the way David flinched slightly when he clapped him on the back. Didn't see the way I smiled too tightly, stood too straight, kept my hands clasped too tightly in front of me. He kissed my cheek. A quick, absent-minded thing. The kind of kiss you give out of habit, not out of love. "Miss me?" he asked with a chuckle. And I laughed. Because what else was there to do? I laughed and said, of course, and poured him a cup of coffee like nothing had happened. Like the walls of our house hadn't shifted during his absence. Like I wasn't standing there, hollowed out and haunted, a stranger in my own skin. David sat through it all with a blank, polite expression, nodding when spoken to, answering questions with one-syllable words. But every now and then. I caught him glancing at me. Quick, furtive looks. Looks that darted away the moment I turned my head. And in those stolen glances, I saw it, the truth we were both trying so desperately to bury. The taste of that night still lived on our tongues. Still lingered between us like the last notes of a song neither of us had the courage to silence. We were both pretending. Pretending we hadn't felt it. Pretending it hadn't happened. Pretending we weren't changed. But the truth has a way of settling into your bones. It doesn't matter how tightly you lock the doors, how many times you scrub your skin raw, how many polite smiles you stretch across your face. Some truths cling to you. Some mistakes carve their names into your very marrow. And no amount of pretending can ever make them go away. Was it motherly affection? Or was it emotional betrayal? I've turned that question over and over in my mind so many times it's worn smooth, like a stone I keep hidden in my pocket, fingering it when the nights stretch too long and sleep feels too far away. I want so badly to believe it was innocence. That it was just two lonely people, two fractured souls, finding a small moment of comfort in a house that had long ago forgotten how to be a home. But deep down, beneath all the excuses and careful lies I tell myself, I know better. It wasn't just loneliness. It wasn't just kindness. It was hunger. And longing. And the terrifying, unbearable sweetness of being seen again. Half of me wishes I could forget it. Wishes I could scrub that night from my memory, wipe it away like chalk from a blackboard, pretend the ache it stirred inside me had never existed. But the other half, the darker half, wants to go back. Wants to step into that suspended moment of connection and live there forever, where the world was soft and dangerous and unbearably alive. There in that heavy kitchen air, before shame could find us, before guilt laid its heavy hand on my shoulder, before the cold light of day came to strip the moment bare. I miss that feeling more than I can say. That fragile, trembling awareness. That sudden, reckless belief that maybe, just maybe, I was still someone worth reaching for. And that's the cruelest part of it all. The thing that keeps me awake at night. Not the guilt. Not the shame. Not even the fear of being caught. It's the longing. The aching, bone-deep yearning for something that should have never belonged to me in the first place. Something that bloomed between us in that stolen breath of time. And then was gone. I keep trying to tell myself it was harmless. That we didn't cross any lines. That there were no confessions, no touches that couldn't be explained away, no sins to write in stone. But that's another lie. Because some lines don't need to be crossed to be broken. Some things, once felt, once tasted, change you. We didn't cross the line. But we erased it with a single taste. And once a line is erased, no matter how hard you try to redraw it, no matter how desperately you pretend it's still there, you know it's not. You know you've already stepped into the space beyond. You can try to go back. You can try to tape it up with good intentions and hollow promises. But you'll always know. Deep down, you'll always know. Some doors, once cracked open, can never be truly closed again. And some parts of yourself, once awakened, never go back to sleep. I carry that night inside me now. Not like a memory, but like a scar. Invisible to the world, but burning against my skin all the same. A reminder. A warning. A confession I can never quite speak aloud. And even as I move through the days, smiling when I'm supposed to, laughing at the right moments, playing the role assigned to me, I know there's a crack running right through the middle of me now. And no matter how hard I try to hide it, I can feel the wind whistling through. Have you ever found yourself reaching for something forbidden, not because you wanted to hurt anyone, not because you meant to betray the life you had built, but simply because you forgot what it felt like to be alive? Because the silence inside you had grown so loud, so unbearable, that you would have done anything, reached for anything, just to hear the sound of your own heart beating again? Was I a villain? Or just a woman? Lost in the quiet hunger of being unseen? Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you know what it's like to stand at the edge of yourself, to look into the eyes of someone you shouldn't want, and feel a flicker of something you thought had died long ago. Maybe you understand. Or maybe you can't. Maybe you'll hate me for it. And maybe I deserve that too. But if stories like this stir something deep inside you, if they make you feel a little less alone in the things you dare not say out loud, please like this video and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Here, we don't just tell stories. We unravel the hidden truths of the human heart, the truths we live with, the truths we survive, the truths we're too afraid to confess, even to ourselves. Desire doesn't knock with warning bells. It doesn't come wearing a red flag or a flashing sign. Sometimes it slides in quietly, wearing the mask of kindness, the disguise of laughter, the soft, aching comfort of being needed. Sometimes it tastes like sweetness on your fingers, only to leave the bitter flavor of regret behind. You think you'll know when the danger comes. You think you'll see it from a mile away. But the truth is, the real danger doesn't come kicking down the door. It tiptoes in. It whispers your name. It slips its hand into yours when you're too tired, too hollow, too starved for tenderness to pull away. Some stories are not about heroes and villains. They're not about right and wrong, black and white. They're about the cracks inside us. The thin, fragile places where our hearts have been worn thin by life. And the way, sometimes, even love, even the best parts of us, forgets its boundaries.